Hey everyone, and welcome back. Ready to dive into something pretty fascinating. Imagine, okay, Nigeria, but not just as a busy travel hub, more like a place where they're actually building the planes themselves.
Ambitious for sure.
Yeah.
It's definitely caught some attention.
Yeah. There's this news article we came across, and it's about a really bold move by the Nigerian government. They're teaming up with XeJet, and get this, some major banks to launch a homegrown aircraft manufacturing company. This isn't some small-scale operation either. It sounds like they really want to make a dent in the aviation world.
What's interesting to me is the long game they seem to be playing. It's not just about putting planes together. It's about Nigeria becoming a real heavyweight in aviation services, not just for themselves, but for the whole West African region.
So aiming to be a regional powerhouse, like a mini Dubai or Singapore, but for aviation. That's a wild thought. The article mentions attracting business from all over West Africa, creating this whole aviation ecosystem. What would it actually take to pull that off?
Well, think about those successful aviation hubs you mentioned. Nigeria needs to learn from them. A strategic location is key, and they've got that. But they'll need robust infrastructure. Things like transportation networks, reliable power, all that. Of course, a skilled workforce. That means a serious investment in training and education.
So learn from the best, but also play to Nigeria's strengths. Speaking of which, we're talking about the biggest economy in Africa here, right?
Exactly. That's a huge market within West Africa, just waiting to be tapped. If Nigeria can make itself the go-to spot for aviation in the region, the economic benefits would be massive, not to mention all the jobs it would create. But we've also got to be realistic. Is the market really there? Are those regional airlines actively looking for new suppliers? Or are they already locked into contracts with the big international players?
Interesting point. Huge potential, but also potential roadblocks.
Okay, there was one detail that really caught my eye in this article. The new facility they're planning, it's not just about making planes. They're also going to have a maintenance, repair, and overhaul center, an MRO, and a training center. Seems like they're thinking beyond just the manufacturing itself.
You picked up on something really important there. This suggests a much more strategic approach. They're not just building planes, they want to service and maintain them too. That's a major draw for international airlines looking for reliable options in the region. And that training center, smart move. It ensures a steady stream of skilled workers so they're not constantly relying on outside help. It's a long-term play, for sure.
I see why the Minister of Aviation, Festus Keyamo, called this a dream come true. But is it a dream everyone in Nigeria shares? Are there challenges they're overlooking? I mean, big projects like this, they don't always go smoothly. You're right to be cautious. There are definitely questions to be asked. How will this impact the aviation businesses that already exist in Nigeria? What about the risk of corruption or just plain mismanagement derailing the whole thing? And the biggest question of all, how are they going to pay for all of this? The article mentions local banks, but is that going to be enough to fund such a huge, ambitious project in the long run? These are all things we need to consider.
Okay, so not all sunshine and rainbows then. It sounds like there's more to uncover here.
Definitely. Let's take a closer look at those challenges and see what we can find out.
So we've got this big picture of Nigeria wanting to make a splash in the aviation world, but like anyone who's ever, I don't know, put together one of those model airplane kits, it's rarely a smooth ride.
Right, and we're not talking about a little glue mishap here. These are challenges that could seriously ground this whole project if they're not handled carefully.
Okay, so let's get into it. What are some of those big potential roadblocks? What could stop Nigeria from getting its aircraft industry off the ground?
Well, you got to start with people, right? Building and maintaining these complex machines, it takes a very specific kind of expertise. And honestly, right now, Nigeria would probably have to rely heavily on bringing in people from other countries. Engineers, mechanics, all those specialized technicians. You can't just snap your fingers and create that kind of workforce overnight.
I get it, but couldn't they just like hire experts from other countries?
Sure, they could, but relying too much on foreign talent has its downsides. It costs a lot, it can make you dependent on other countries, and it doesn't really help build up Nigeria's own long-term economic growth. It'd be much better for them to invest in education and training programs right there in Nigeria.
So build up the expertise from within. Makes sense, but that takes time, right? And a lot of resources.
Absolutely. But if you think about the payoff, it's huge. If Nigeria can create this pipeline of highly skilled people in aviation, it's not just this project that benefits, it's the whole country's economy for years to come.
Long game thinking, I like that. Okay, but what about the actual physical stuff? Nigeria's existing infrastructure, are their roads, ports, their power grid, are those even ready to handle a major manufacturing operation like this?
That's a really big question. I mean, you need reliable ways to transport all the materials and parts. You need consistent power to run the factories. You need really sophisticated logistics systems to coordinate it all. Bringing those systems up to international standards, that could mean huge investments.
So it's not just building a shiny factory, it's about upgrading the whole country's infrastructure in some ways.
Exactly. And then there's another layer to this, the whole regulatory environment. Nigeria is going to have to establish clear rules and regulations for how you manufacture aircraft, meeting international safety standards, certification processes, the whole nine yards.
So they're going to have to convince the world that a plane made in Nigeria is just as safe and reliable as a plane made anywhere else. Sounds like a tall order.
It's a challenge, that's for sure. They'll need to work really closely with those international aviation organizations, invest in really strong quality control systems, and maybe even partner with some of those established manufacturers to learn the ropes and build credibility.
All right, so we've got some hurdles here. Skilled workforce, infrastructure questions, those regulatory challenges. And I haven't even mentioned the elephant in the room. How are they going to pay for all this?
Ah, yes. That's the billionaire question. Even if they figure out all those other problems, where's the money coming from? Building a competitive aviation industry and keeping it going takes deep pockets.
The article did mention some local banks being involved, but is that really enough to make this happen?
It's a start, I'll give them that, but
Yeah.
they're going to need a lot more investment than that, maybe from international partners, private equity firms, even some of those venture capitalists who are looking for opportunities in emerging markets. The real question is, can they convince those investors that this is a smart bet?
And even if they get that initial investment, they can't just rest on their laurels, right? There's going to be ongoing costs, research and development to stay competitive, keeping up with new technologies. This isn't a one and done kind of expense.
Absolutely. The aviation industry never stands still. It's constantly changing. Nigeria is going to have to be constantly innovating, adapting just to keep up. That means a constant commitment to research and development, upgrading facilities, attracting the best talent, and keeping them there. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Okay, I'm not going to lie, this is starting to sound a little bit daunting. Lots of challenges, big investments needed, tough competition from those companies that have been doing this for decades. Any reason for optimism here?
Well, remember, every successful industry, they all had to start somewhere. Nobody's saying it'll be easy, but there are paths to success, especially if Nigeria plays its cards right. Maybe instead of trying to do everything, be everything to everyone, they focus on something specific, a niche, something those big players aren't already doing.
Okay, give me an example. What kind of niche are we talking about?
Think about the things that are unique to West Africa, the challenges they face. Maybe there's a market for smaller cargo planes that are specifically designed for those shorter runways and tougher terrain you find in some parts of the region. Or they could become experts in building planes that are really fuel efficient and have low operating costs, which would be really appealing to airlines in a region where fuel prices can be so high.
So, find a problem that nobody else is solving, become the absolute best at solving it, and use that as a stepping stone. I like that. And it kind of ties back into that whole regional hub idea, right? If they can become the aviation experts in West Africa, they might not need to take on the whole world just yet.
Exactly. Dominate a smaller market first, build up that expertise, get a reputation, and then start expanding. Classic underdog strategy, and it could really work for Nigeria.
And let's not forget about innovation. The aviation industry is constantly evolving. There are always new technologies popping up. Maybe Nigeria could actually jump ahead of the curve by embracing those new trends.
I was just thinking that. Imagine if they became leaders in electric aircraft or drone technology, areas where the playing field's a bit more level. That could be a real game changer.
So even with all these challenges we've talked about, there's still room for optimism, for finding creative solutions, for blazing a trail that nobody else has thought of yet. That's what makes this whole story so compelling to me.
It just goes to show that even when you're up against huge obstacles, human ingenuity and determination can find a way.
And that's what we'll be looking at next. What are some of the ways Nigeria could tackle these hurdles and actually turn this ambitious dream into a reality? Stay with us. Okay, so we've laid out the potential, the roadblocks, even some pretty clever strategies. But stepping back for a minute, this feels bigger than just, I don't know, planes and profits.
It really does. This whole venture, if they pull it off, it could have a ripple effect way beyond the aviation industry itself. We could be talking about a real shift in how the world sees Nigeria.
Exactly. Imagine the headlines. Made in Nigeria takes flight. It's not just about oil anymore or natural resources. It's about high tech, about a nation that's building its own future. Literally.
It's a strong message to send, both inside Nigeria and to the rest of the world. It could inspire a whole generation of young people there to get into science and engineering, attract more investment from overseas, even boost tourism. Suddenly, there's this new story about what's possible in Africa.
And those ripple effects we keep talking about.
Yeah.
This could be the spark for so much more than just building planes. Think about all the industries that would benefit logistics, new materials, software, maintenance, training, you name it.
You got it. And don't forget the jobs it could create. Not just those high-skilled engineering jobs, but manufacturing, all the support roles that keep a complex industry running. It's a whole ecosystem that could grow up around this.
Okay, so we've got this picture of a brighter future for Nigeria, maybe even for the whole region. But dreams are one thing, making them happen is another. What are some things you, the listener, should be watching for to see if this is actually taking off? What are the signs of real progress, and what are some red flags that maybe things aren't going so well?
Great question. First and foremost, follow the money. Are those local banks actually putting up the big bucks? Are international partners coming on board? Big projects like this, they need a constant flow of investment to survive.
So funding is crucial. What about the actual work being done? What should we be looking for on the ground, so to speak?
Look for signs of those training centers and education programs we talked about. Are they being built? Are they partnering with universities to create courses specifically for aviation? Are young people excited about getting into this field? Without that skilled workforce, the whole thing's going to struggle.
Got it. Funding, education, check. Anything else?
Infrastructure, that's huge. Are they upgrading roads and airports to handle the increased traffic? Are they strengthening the power grid to make sure those factories have reliable energy? It's not always headline news, but those are the things that make or break a project like this.
It's those behind-the-scenes things that often determine success or failure. What about those regulatory hurdles we talked about? Any updates there?
That's one to watch closely. See if Nigeria is putting in place clear safety standards that are recognized internationally. Are they working with reputable organizations to certify their aircraft? That's going to be key for building trust and convincing buyers.
So to sum up, we're looking for signs of investment, education, infrastructure improvements, and a solid regulatory framework. If those things start falling into place, then we might be witnessing the birth of a whole new industry in Nigeria.
And remember, this story is still being written. The choices they make in the coming months and years, those are going to decide whether this ambitious vision takes flight or stays on the drawing board.
Well, listeners, we've given you the knowledge and hopefully some good questions to ask as you follow this story. Will Nigeria's aviation dreams take off? Only time will tell. We'll be watching, and we hope you will too. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and until next time, keep exploring.